So again, welcome everybody. This is the looking into the network part. So we're going to start off with the next three talks of our web session on vulnerability management. So again, I hope you can see the second slide. Otherwise, please nag or complain. So this is the first of three more talks we will be giving. We call this session "Looking into the Network." Maybe it's not really correct because we will not be looking only into the network, but on local systems as well. That will be my part for today. And the next two talks are, as mentioned here, the network vulnerability scanning will be held by Toby on Wednesday. And as Pauline just mentioned, the last one, the penetration test, we have to reschedule, unfortunately. So bear with us, but it will happen. The talk is ready and you will get it eventually. So what we'll be covering today, we will not really be talking about standards and processes in this session, because first of all, I think Klaus has already mentioned many of those standards and processes in the previous three modules or sessions, and I think most of you have been there. So I will just very, very briefly touch on this because we thought it would be much more interesting for you guys to have more practical and concrete examples. So we will be looking at some of the benchmarks or baselines that are out there to check the security of your local systems. And we will be looking at a few tools, and I will also have a demo at the end, and we all know what that means. So moving on, this is actually the only slide for today with a standard. So the ISO 30111 vulnerability handling one, which Klaus mentioned a few weeks ago. And yeah, but again, I'm not going into very much detail today because we will be looking at, oh no, that's, initially I wanted to replace those next two slides, which I stole. I don't think we really need motivation, do we, for this? I mean, we're already in the middle of the vulnerability handling module. So we all know we have to deal with vulnerabilities. I copied those slides anyway. They are from a training we call transits. Some of you may know this. Transits is a training given explicitly for incident response teams, like we are at the DF to motivate people. Why do we need to deal with vulnerabilities? But I don't think we will do this in detail today. So what's this all about today? We need, or we want to find a way to proactively, and that's very important here, to proactively measure the security of our local systems, all the systems that are part of our infrastructure, part of our organization, wherever or however large the organization is. We want to measure the security. So yes, this is about vulnerabilities, but it's much more. It's about misconfigurations. It's about patch levels which might be wrong or inappropriate. It's about compliance to technical documents. This is what we will be looking at today. And of course, it seems obvious, but you have to state it anyway. You don't want to do this manually for each and every system on your organization or your infrastructure. You preferably want an automated way to do this. But then the first question obviously is, how do we measure and against what do we measure our systems? So there's quite a few standards or requirements documents, compliance documents out there, from especially organizations like PCI, the Payment Card Industry Standard, the Health Insurance, blah, blah, blah Act. They all have lots and lots of documents which state, yes, you have to have patch management, you have to have vulnerability management and things like that. But how do we measure our local systems against those documents? That's a hard part, and that's what today's talk will be about. And I hope you will learn how to do this in your organization. So let's look at some of those benchmarks that are out there. And one of the first one, which is actually a very, very well-known one, which has been around for quite a few years, and it's actually being used all over the world, is the so-called CIS controls. CIS is an organization called the Center for Internet Security. It's a rather large one. Consists of many independent security researchers, and it's a non-profit organization. So they don't earn money through publishing security documents or guidelines or tools or stuff like that. Everything is non-profit, and it's especially community driven. And the SIS controls is a document which has been around for quite some time now. And the goal initially was to provide to the community, to you and me, prioritized and simplified best practices in terms of computer security. So I've just copied here some of their goals from their website or from the documents. We want to be able to identify the most common and important real-world cyber attacks that affect enterprises every day. Then that knowledge needs to be translated and experienced into positive, constructive action for defenders. So they want to not only identify this is a threat model, this is an exploit, this is an attack, but they want defenders to be able to action on those information. The recommendation is actually called safeguards. We'll be looking at this in a minute. And the goals with respect to the safeguards are they must be specific. Okay, that's obvious. But now the next sentence really is a very strong one, I think. Our safeguards, we want to make them implementable, okay, usable, scalable, and in alignment, and read that, with all industry or government security requirements. So that's a pretty challenging goal, but that has been their goal since the very first version of that document. The SIS controls must be measurable. So I must, after I'm implementing controls, I must be able to measure it. Is my local system really in line with this and that control? And I want to, or they want to avoid inconsistent interpretation of their stuff. So that's really interesting all in all. And from the very beginning, they also said, let's please not write things like, oh, we could do this and that once we have time into the document. So it has to be a pretty concise document. So this is the SIS controls. And actually, it's a document you can consider it part of as a framework maybe. If you download this from their website, it has some 80 or 90 pages. And with these 18 controls. So you have inventory and control of enterprise assets, software assets, things like account management, of course, vulnerability management, that's what we're talking about here, and a few other things. And again, you can download everything for free from them. All you have to do is register an account with them because they want your email address, but I have never received even a single spam mail from them, so that's okay. And there's lots of material to download from their website, which you will find in the reference section of this presentation, by the way, so you don't have to write things down. You can download this thing afterwards, and we will point you to the right locations. So again, this is the 18 controls, which if we look into maybe two of them in a bit more detail, these are the so-called safeguards. So everything in here, the 1.1 is safeguard 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. So this is actually the content of one of the controls. In this case, the first one, inventory and control of enterprise assets. For each safeguard, we have different asset types. These can be devices, this can be the network, this can be users, this can be applications. You get the idea. Then they have a so-called security function, which can be identify, respond, detect, protect, and stuff like that. And they have so-called implementation groups, IG1 to IG3. The idea behind those implementation groups is that not all the organizations or companies in the world will implement everything. So IG1, for example, is what they say is small or medium enterprises, which maybe they have an IT person, but definitely not a security person. So they will definitely not implement all of the safeguards within those SIS controls. IG2 is a rather large organization, which has, of course, an IT department and maybe people who do security or protect your network. And IG3 ultimately is an organization which has security experts. So, and you see, if you look further down, there's safeguards within the document which are only addressed by certain kinds of companies. And then this is a safeguard, for example. You have to ensure that the process exists to address unauthorized assets on a weekly basis. And things like that. So you get the idea. We're not going to go into detail with every single control, but you get the idea. And since we are on the topic of vulnerability management, this is a vulnerability management control with a couple of safeguards as well. So perform operating system updates on enterprise assets through automated patch management on a monthly or more frequent basis. So this is, again, this is one of those safeguards in this document. I can only recommend that download the document if you're interested in these things. It's, there's much more in there. There's descriptions and stuff like that. It's very, very readable as well. Interestingly, the version 8 I was just talking about is rather new. It's just a few weeks old. So for those of you who have already dealt with sys controls, they have changed quite a bit compared to version 7. First of all, it's 18 instead of 20 sys controls. They claim they have rewritten the whole document from scratch, basically. So some of the controls from earlier have been merged. For example, this one, secure configuration and secure configuration of network devices, was merged into configuration of enterprise assets and software. It should read here. Things like data protection has been priorities much more higher. So it's now the third one, actually, because we all know, not only because GDPR, but the data protection has become more important. Something have vanished, at least in terms of titles. So you no longer find things like boundary defense, which we have talked about, I don't know, 20 years ago, or wireless access controls. These controls are not gone. They just have been merged into other sections. And there's a new one as well, the control number 15, for example, the service provider management, because nowadays, as you all know, things get more and more moved into the cloud or cloud-based organizational stuff. So they said we need to have a dedicated security sys control in terms of service provider management. So, but how do you actually translate those things into something you can act on or act upon? So let's go back to slides. This one, for example, perform operating system updates. What does it mean for me as an IT administrator on my, I don't know, Red Hat Linux server, this sort of thing? So they also provide something they call sys benchmarks. And the sys benchmark actually are take the safeguards from the sys controls and kind of translate those into configuration guidelines, which are vendor neutral, but which are very specific. We will look at an example very soon. And again, if you look at their website, they have more than 100 benchmarks available for all kinds of operating systems applications. Some 25 vendor product families they support. Sometimes these documents are more than 1,000 pages strong, so there really went a lot of work in there. And the important thing, of course, you don't want to read 1,000 pages of documents for Red Hat. So all of these benchmarks have actually been implemented in applications and are supported by many security vendors out there. So if we just briefly look at one example, this is one from SUSE Linux Enterprise 15 benchmark. It's about a year old, but that doesn't matter. I just randomly grabbed one page to give you an impression of what this looks like. For example, this safeguard says, ensure that an HTTP server is not installed. So if you don't need an HTTP server on this particular host, please deinstall it. And there's a bit of description, a rationale, and then it gets specific right down here. This is a command to check whether Apache is installed or not. And if you find Apache and don't want it, remove it with using this command. And there's also a reference to syscontrol, the applicable syscontrol. This is still version 7. As I said, version 8 is so new that they haven't translated all the benchmarks yet, but you get the idea. This is how the benchmarks look like in practice. And they also say it's not only Apache, you do have Lidi and Nginx, and check for these as well. And to sum up, these syscontrols are implemented by many security vendors out there. So if your organization has already licensed or bought some of these security tools, it is very likely that syscontrols is already implemented in your organization. For example, many of you will know the OpenVAS scanner from Greenbone, or where's Tenable? I don't know. There's Tenable Nessus security scanner. They all support those syscontrols, which I think is a good thing. They also provide a very basic and very simple tool called Syscad Lite. There's also a professional version, but I have not looked at this. Syscad Lite you can use on your local system. It's a Java application and run one of those benchmarks against your local system. But again, it's a very, very simple tool. And the tool I will show you in a demo in a bit has much more functionality and is much more interesting to play with. Okay, this is so much for the syscontrol world. What does Microsoft do? Of course, they do have similar things, and actually there's quite a few very, very useful information as well. In the Microsoft ecosystem, everything centers around a toolkit they call the Microsoft Security Compliance Toolkit, SCT. Again, it's free from Microsoft's website to download, and you will find links in the reference section of our presentation. And their goal is to allow enterprise security admins to download, analyze, test, edit, and store Microsoft recommended security configuration baselines for Windows and for other Microsoft products. And they can compare their current GPOs, their group policy objects, with Microsoft recommended baselines or other baselines. So it's not only about Microsoft. You can just download, for example, the syscontrol baseline for Microsoft Windows 10, for example, and check them with the security compliance toolkit as well. And of course, you can apply them broadly through Active Directory or individually through local pods. And the security compliance toolkit, the SCT, actually consists of a number of tools. The most important one is the tool called the Policy Analyzer. So this tool, I have a few screenshots coming up. This tool allows you to analyze and compare sets of GPOs, either on your local system or from baselines which you've downloaded or baseline which were provided by Microsoft. And the tool highlights when a set of GPOs has redundant settings or inconsistencies. Again, this is all based on Microsoft recommendations, but these recommendations usually are not the worst ones, I can tell you. They highlight difference. You can compare GPOs against local registry settings, stuff like that. You can, which is a very interesting feature, capture a baseline right now and, I don't know, run it again in a week or in a month and compare the changes, which sometimes is very interesting. And you also have a tool they call the LGPO, Local Group Policy Object, which is especially useful for all those hosts out there that are not in domain joined systems. So, and the other tools are interesting as well, but we will not cover those today. And baselines from Microsoft are these here, you can see. So once you download the Security Compliance Toolkit, the SCT, you will get all these baselines as part of the toolkit. So it covers already quite a lot. But again, you will find other baselines out there from other vendors or from, as I said, syscontrol and stuff like that. And if we briefly look at the Policy Analyzer, it's a very basic application. So it's not fancy, but you don't want to have it fancy at this point. And you can see here a number of baselines, which are, in this case, included in the tool, but you can easily add more whenever you like. And what you really want to do is, once you've chosen one, in this case the Windows 1909, so a rather old one, has been chosen, and once you're ready to go, you can compare your local system against this particular baseline which has been selected here. You can also select more than one. May make sense if you have special configurations in your organization, which you probably do have. And what's interesting, you can also use this tool to view and compare baselines with each other, which will be shown on the next screenshot. And I apologize for the screen resolution. It's not that optimal, but I hope you can read it anyway. Here you can see that we have imported a number of different baselines. For example, again, hello, see the syscontrols are here. Then the Microsoft provided one, and one from the DISA, which is the Defense Information Security Agency in the US. They have their own standard. And this is a comparison in this case, per policy group or registry key. And the tool shows us where the baselines differ. For example, and the color code is pretty simple. Every time you see a gray field here, it means this value is not part of this control or this, of this baseline or benchmark. It's only part in this one. For example, the app compat registry key is just not being handled in either of those two baselines, but it's handled in this one. And the yellow code means, yes, it is handled, but the value differ. For example, here we have something with a device guard configuration, and those two baselines say the value should be 1 in the registry, and this one says it's 0. So you can compare these things and think about your own local system or your local organization, whether it makes sense or not. And there's descriptions down here which are really, really useful. So this is a Microsoft world. I don't want to spend much more time on this. Probably many of you who are in the Microsoft world already know those tools. These are really, really useful. The one thing I really want to show you, though, is SCAP or OpenSCAP. SCAP actually is it is a standard. I told you I didn't want to talk about standards, but I'm only listing it here. So SCAP is a security content automation protocol. It's a framework of standards and protocols developed by NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology. And there's a tool, or it's a set of tools actually, called OpenSCAP. So they implemented everything from the SCAP protocol in open source and free tools. So I just read it here from the website. The OpenSCAP ecosystems provides multiple tools to assist admins and auditors with assessment, measurement, and enforcement of security baselines. So again, it's a tool simple to syscat. I can just feed this tool or these tools with benchmarks or baselines I have and check on my local system. OpenSCAP provides a wide variety of hardening guides and configuration baselines. Again, this is not only about vulnerabilities, but also about misconfiguration and patch levels. So hardening and configuration baselines are very useful as well. Developed by the open source community. Again, everything is free and open source. Ensuring that you can choose a policy which best suits the need of your organization. Now, they support many of the things I already mentioned. We have the payment card industry again, and our sys controls are in here. Everything is open source, and this applies to platforms as well as products. So the OpenSCAP tool itself is a simple scanner. You run in a system. I will show you a demo soon. But as I said, it's actually a number of different tools, especially for automated things like continuous evaluation. So there's an OpenSCAP daemon, which you can run every now and then on your system. So you don't want to do this manually, as I said. And now I'm trying a demo, and we all know what that means. So you should see a terminal window. Please complain if you don't see a terminal window. So I'm on my local system here. All the tools are really actually installed on my system. I'm running OpenSUSE. And it's pre-packaged, so I don't have to compile anything, but I could, of course, because everything is open source and free available. The first thing, there's one prerequisite when using the SCAP tools or OpenSCAP. You need to have the so-called SCAP security guide, it's called, installed. And I'll just show you this on my local system. It's pre-packaged benchmarks and baselines. So this is actually hundreds and thousands of files which are downloaded. These need to be there once you run the SCAP tools. And there's actually a few. I'm sorry, this is wrong. There's actually quite a few tools. These are command line tools. You can easily script it and automate it and then cron things and stuff like that. So there's a couple of out there. But today we will be looking at a tool which is a GUI wrapper around those tools. And this is called the SCAP Workbench. And again, I can hope you can see the application. Right at the beginning, it tells me this SCAP security guide was found installed on this machine. So that's good to go. And then we can move on and select which content we want to load. So which kind of baseline are we interested in? And these are the ones that come with the tool. So we have Oracle, Linux, Red Hat, CentOS, Debian, and stuff like that. This is all pre-packaged, so you don't have to install anything if these are the systems you're interested in. But you can, of course, anytime choose other SCAP content you will find out there on other websites, for example. So for this demo, we will start by looking at Red Hat Enterprise Linux version 8 and load the content. I hope you can see it. I don't have a way to increase the font, I think. So this is the Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 benchmark or baseline, whatever you like to call it. The first thing you notice is you can either scan your local machine or you can run this over SSH, which in my case doesn't work because it wasn't compiled with SSH support, but I could do this myself if I wanted to. And then we have a number of profiles here, and the pre-selected is always the very first one of the list. It's alphabetically sorted from ANSI, whatever that is. But if you click on this, you can see there's quite a few different profiles related to Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 that come with this tool. And here again, we have the syscontrols, which actually have 268 safeguards installed, whereas this one has 156. Again, you will find the payment card industry stuff, Health Insurance Act, and things like that. So you can choose which one fits your organization best, and you can of course customize these things, which I show you in a second. So let's choose syscontrols, since we've talked about this for quite some time now. And these are, it tells us 268 controls or safeguards or rules in this case are part of this profile, and you will find all these here. So we're not going into detail. You can try this tool yourself, but you will find things which are obvious if you're into Red Hat Linux, things like file permissions control with RPM. And every time you click on one of those things, it gets expanded, and you have a nice little description on what this actually means. And sometimes you even have something you can easily copy and paste to the command line. But again, you don't want to do this manually. It's just there. It's information which is there. You know, all the things you might expect, password minimum age and stuff like that. Okay, you can also expand all, which I don't think makes sense at all, but they offer this opportunity. But as I said, the thing you really want to do is you want to customize this to your own needs. So once you want to do this, first of all, you get asked for a name. Just call this Géant demo. And then another window opens and shows us all those rules that are come with the tool. First of all, I'm going to hide the subsections here because it's too much. So we have two meta sections like introduction. This is actually, it's a bit like a mini how-to. You can't really set anything. It's just a README. And then you have something which is from the project itself, with things like please don't change this, and therefore you cannot click on anything. And the two main things are here: the system settings and the services. And if you just briefly look at this, I will close some of these things. You get the idea. You have maintaining software, we have access control, audit daemon, SE Linux, syslog, and stuff like that. And you can easily activate or deactivate certain rules. Yeah. You can undo things. You can select everything, which is, again, doesn't make sense at all. So undo this. So these are the two main sections: the system settings and the services here. You know, remote file system, configure NFS and stuff like that. Everything's there. I think all in all, it's about 1,300 rules which are inside this tool. But again, everything's open source. If there's a rule missing, which you are interested in, you just add it. And you can quickly check one or two things. I will just search for the term password here. There you find the password hashing algorithm, with a has an own rule. And here's actually an interesting example, because this one brings a value with it, which you can change to your needs. And it also tells you this rule, the password hashing algorithm, affects another rule. The hashing algorithm has to be set in the etc login devs file, which is here, for example. So if I click on this, it will point us to that rule. So we have a correlation between those rules in the tool, which is a good thing as well. Another thing I really like is the obsolete thing. It tells us there's a couple of really old services which most of us will no longer need and no longer will run. So things like NIS, Telnet, RLogin, very ancient one, TFTP. If you don't need this, disable it or remove it through those rules. Okay, you get the idea. I'm now going to quickly just make a few changes and press OK. And now the tool tells us that this profile has been customized, and I have unsaved changes, so I would need to save the file in order to use it afterwards for another audit or measurement. But again, if you start playing around with this tool for the first time in your environment, don't customize anything. Just make a couple of runs on your organization, on your hosts, and you get a feeling for what needs to be customized and what is okay out of the box. So for this demo, however, we will look at another profile. As I said, I do have running here OpenSUSE. So let's look what OpenSUSE gives us. Yes, I'm really sure. And now you see a completely different profile compared to the one before. There's exactly 3 rules in this profile, which means it's not really useful, is it? It's useless, I would say. But as I said, this whole project is community driven, and apparently the OpenSUSE community has just not dealt with these things. They have not, no one has been active in defining or writing such a benchmark or profile for OpenSUSE. However, I haven't really searched the internet. There may be profiles out there which I have not yet found, but because I didn't look. And there's no other profile for OpenSUSE. Again, for this demo, it's okay. Because I can show you how the tool runs and the result. So it's only 3 rules. I prepared my customization. So I select the customization file, which is in here. They call it tailoring files. And I just added 2 more rules for the sake of this demo with the verified group, who the shadow, the group, the shadow file belongs to, and the allowed FTP users access. So, and now we're ready to go. I mean, we can do a dry run, which is a nice thing. As I said, you will not. In your organization, you will probably not run this GUI tool on every single host. So you will want it automated on the command line. And so when I press dry run and say scan, it shows me the command line which I should use when I do this manually, not manually, via crontab, for example. I can also enable to fetch remote resources, so that the idea here is that profiles can contain links to external resources, which gets downloaded once you scan a system, which we will not do here. And then you also have a remediate button, which attempts to automatically correct issues identified by the scan. But be very careful with this one, obviously. So let's just do a run. It's pretty fast, actually. Well, it's only 5 rules, but even I've played around with bigger profiles. It's a really fast tool. And normally I would just show you the report here, but this would try to open a browser. And since I'm running this tool as root, the browser won't open. So I have saved the result to a different file. And we'll show you this in the Chromium browser. So this is actually the result of the scan we just did, or I just did a few days ago. We have a bit of description here, then some metadata, for example, the CPE platforms that were detected. You may remember CPE as discussed by Klaus a few weeks ago. And then you have the compliance and scoring part, which again, in this case is not super, super interesting because we only have 5 rules, but it says the target system did not specify the condition of 1 rules, 3 were passed. The severity was medium of that failed rule and stuff like that. Obviously, in a real audit, this would look much different. But again, you get the idea of how it looks like. And then you will be led to all the rules. And whether they pass, whether they fail, whether they were not checked for whatever reason. And well, this fits on one single page, but you can easily just, for example, deactivate everything that was passed. Why would I look at things that pass anyway? Or things that were not applicable or not checked? You can hide things over here. So this is the report. You can, of course, export this via the OpenSCAP tool to other formats, but for the demo, the HTML version is the interesting one. If you, for example, look at the one which failed, which says verify group who owns the shadow file, you get another window which shows a number of details. For example, lots and lots and lots of references to other external resources. For example, this one to sys controls, but also PCI security standards. So there's lots out there. If I want to know more about this particular rule, then the information is there. And down here it says the Etsy shadow file has a group ID of 15, but the rule wants us to have the group ID 0. So run the command change group Etsy shadow. We do have things like remediation shell script here inside. We have some Ansible snippet, which may be of interest to us. So you get the idea of what such a report looks like. Can also show all result details, but we're not going to use this here. So that is it for the demo. I think they worked pretty well, and let's get back for the final few slides. There we go. Okay, demo time. I think that's basically it for today. The good thing is, or put it another way, when I started this talk, preparing this talk, I wasn't sure. I wasn't aware that so much information is out there for free and open source. So you don't have to invent the wheel yourself. You don't have to start from zero. There's so many things out there. And again, the slides contain a number of links where you can download many stuff. Many tools are available. I really like this OpenSCAP tool I just showed you. And it's under constant development. So it's not something which just sits there and no one works on it. And of course, this is for the larger organizations you might be working for. If you have commercial tools, these benchmarks like sys controls are implemented already. So again, you don't have to invent the wheel for yourself. Yeah, what was not covered, of course, we didn't look into commercial tools. But you can do this yourself if it's in your enterprise or your organization. And we didn't want to hammer you with more protocols and standards. That is for another time. I think we wanted that you hopefully take away a few things which you can play around with yourself. And I hope that some of the tools are new to you and you may want to play around with it. Or maybe you have to play around with it. I don't know. So that's basically it for today. I think we have plenty of time for questions if there are any. Thank you very much for attending. And yes, I think that's it for now. I'll try to look at the chat window if I find it. I think I stopped sharing the screen. Have a look at the chat.
Is there any more questions? There's nothing in the chat, Stefan.
Yes, Klaus has a comment, which, I think it's okay, yes. Next time we'll do this.
Okay, so that's it for today. The next module the next session in this training module will take place on the 30th. So see you then. All right, thank you, Stefan.
Thank you very much. Take care, guys. Thanks for attending.